Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the Monday, May 11th meeting of the Lincoln City Council at 3 p.m. As you can tell, we are meeting via Zoom video conferencing. And as you know, our federal government, our state government, our city and county have all declared a state of emergency during this pandemic. The governor, by his executive order 20-03, has authorized a limited waiver during this declaration of emergency that permits all public bodies in the state to meet by video conferencing, telephone conference call, and other telecommunication applications, so long as the meeting is provided to members of the public and the media, that we have announced this meeting, that it will be via video conferencing, and that we all have a copy of the Open Meetings Act with us. And I know that we have a copy of the Open Meetings Act posted at the back of the chamber as well. But we are happy to have the public participate in this fashion, or they can also participate at councilpacket.lincoln.ne.gov and let us know their thoughts that way. For those of you who would like to know how we're broadcasting, you can do it on going to www.youtube.com/linktv-city or facebook.com/LNKTV-city. So with that, we are encouraging people to participate via Zoom, but if you do wish to appear, and some, as I understand, are in the Luxford studio, we ask that you wait there until your item is called, and then you will enter the City Council chambers and come to the podium. And after your 5 minutes are up, you will exit the chamber as soon as you can through the door to your immediate left. And as you know, we've been doing video conferencing for the last several meetings. And if you would like to participate via Zoom, we ask that you contact the city clerk's office, and you must contact the city clerk by noon of the day of our meeting. Having said that, I would like to invite everybody, let's get to work to do our jobs as elected officials by doing our part to protect the public, our staff, and our families. And now I ask that my colleagues mute their microphones as we stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation. And in Sandra's screen, we do have the US flag. So let's all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Sony, let's go ahead and call the first item of business.
Okay, just as a reminder, due to the Memorial Day holiday, the City Council will not meet on Monday, May 25th, 2020. And those, we ask those of the general public coming forward to testify to please clearly state your name, spell your name, give your address, and sign in on the sign-in sheet lining at the podium. Testifiers, please use the microphone where the sign-in sheet is set on next to. We ask those individuals from city staff who are testifying to also please state your name and title at the department that you work for. And then once you testify and council does not have any questions for you, you may return or exit the door to the left of the council chambers. And our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1A through 2A.
Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to testify on any of these items? Or if there is anyone participating in Zoom, if you could please raise your hand if you would like to testify. And I'm watching the camera on the chambers and I do not see anyone approaching the chamber. So Sony, I guess we can vote on the appropriate items.
Okay, we can vote on our consent items 1A and 1B, introduced by McGinnis.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by McGinnis and seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Our next item on the agenda would be our public hearing resolutions. Item 4A, accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for April 1st through April 30th, 2020.
Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to testify on any one of the items that are in the claims report? Or is there anyone online that would like to participate and testify on one of the claims? If you could please raise your hand. Okay, I do not see anyone approaching the podium. Okay, I think we can move on.
Item 4B is the Comprehensive Plan Conformance 2003, application of Urban Development Director for a proposed amendment to the Antelope Valley Redevelopment Plan to add the Antelope Tower redevelopment project generally located between L Street on the north, K Street on the south, Antelope Valley Parkway on the west, and 20th Street on the east.
Thank you. I see, is that Dan Marvin there? Yes. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm here before you today. We have an application for Antelope Tower. It's a redevelopment plan amendment to the Antelope Valley Agreement, and I'll share with you, see if the Elmo works. Couple of pictures. This process has gone through Planning Commission. It's gone through 2 meetings at the Urban Design Committee. The first meeting, there were some additional questions that Urban Design had for them on the actual building. This would be the east view of the building. And there is a western view here. Urban Design had some questions about the way the building on the west functioned. They wanted it to be a little bit more interactive and facing the street. There were some changes on that project to allow double-sided entry for retail, street access. There were some movements of some of the vent covers for the building. But overall, I think they made some additional improvements, and at the last meeting of Urban Design, they approved this project to move forward. We have with us today, we have Tom Houston, who's the attorney representing this project as well. And I'd like to allow Tom to say a few words on it too, but I'm available for any questions if you have any questions for urban development.
Are there any questions for Mr. Marvin? Okay, I don't see any, and we welcome Mr. Houston.
Thank you, members of the council. As Dan mentioned, my name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln on behalf of the developer Hobby Brothers, LLC. The amendment to the redevelopment plan is for a 5-story structure at the intersection of K and L Streets and Antelope Valley on the west. You know that's 3 arterial streets that converge at that location in our city. This project will be comprised of approximately 18,000 square feet of retail on the first floor and 4 stories containing 93 dwelling units, which really is designed to be workforce housing for moderate income residents of downtown. As Dan mentioned, this has been before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission did approve a special permit for a height waiver. This is in or adjacent to the Capital Environs District, which has a height limitation of 57 feet. And the Planning Commission approved a special permit to allow height up to 65 feet, is my memory. A couple things I wanted to mention is that obviously the question in front of you was whether or not the amendment to the redevelopment plan is consistent with the general plan for development. When we examined the comprehensive plan evidenced by L Plan 2040, the 2018 Downtown Master Plan, and the Antelope Valley Redevelopment Plan, this mixed income, moderate income project is certainly a welcome benefit and something that we desire to be constructed in our downtown. A couple things I wanted to mention about the cost benefit analysis, since we're supposed to be looking at that. The investment is over probably in excess of $12 million. We're projecting an incremental value of approximately $9 million to generate approximately $2 million in tax increment financing. So there will be a tax shift that will occur in order to reimburse the developer for the eligible expenses up to that $2 million number. The impact on the infrastructure, we think it's nominal, if any. This project did receive a deviation approval from the LTU department to allow access onto L Street and K Street, and that's primarily to facilitate the retail development. The other impacts that we're supposed to examine is the employment. We think this is a beneficial impact on employment, will provide additional housing opportunities for employees of downtown Lincoln. We think it will have minimal, if any, impact on student populations. The 93 dwelling units will be primarily consisting of studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments. There will be 23 two-bedroom apartments, but no three bedrooms. It's smaller units really designed for the downtown employees and young professionals in downtown Lincoln. The other impact that I would mention is this is a key corridor, and that's why we spent the time and worked with the Urban Design Committee to address all their concerns and make sure that it's consistent with the urban fabric required by the downtown design standards. We're working on a redevelopment agreement. We hope to have that back in front of you in the next month or so, several weeks anyway, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Houston? Is there, oh, I have a question. Tom, as I was reading some of the remarks by the Urban Review Committee, they talked a lot about the facade that faces Antelope Valley Parkway. And can you, I don't know if Dan went over them or you may have touched on them. Can you tell about the modifications that they made to make sure the facade is pleasing to those who drive by on that busy corridor?
Characterized as three primary concerns. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to look, so I'm kind of puzzled here. I'll look at the screen here. There was three primary concerns, the first of which is pretty easy. There was an outdoor vent for potential restaurant space, and we changed the venting just to make it more, I guess, unobtrusive, and I think that was a pretty easy fix. One of the other concerns was there was not enough glass, not enough glazing on the west facade, and that the architects increased the glazing by over 50% when we went back to the Urban Design Committee. And then there was also a concern about the grade differential because the sidewalk is a little bit lower than the finished floor area of the first floor of the retail area, and some additional, I won't call it dock area, but some additional ramping, and was really consolidated in certain areas to make it more pedestrian friendly and make it more inviting. So those are the three design changes that were primarily addressed.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about parking? Parking always seems to be an issue no matter where any development is located. So how are they handling the parking?
The parking obviously consists of the area east of the building. If I had a current site plan, I would show it to you, and I was trying to remember the precise number of parking stalls. It's my memory that the precise number was in excess of 95 parking stalls. The parking is, first of all, this area is located in the B4 downtown district, and there used to be an exception for parking that would require parking even in this B4 area. That zoning code change was made several years ago so that there is no parking requirement. But notwithstanding that fact, this was really sized to make sure, the parking lot was sized to make sure that there was at least one stall for every residence and sufficient stalls to make the retail work well. Because that was really the emphasis. That's the challenge. Obviously, we all recognize that retail on the first floor in downtown Lincoln is the goal and objective of the downtown design standards. It's hard to make work unless you have adequate parking. So that's how the parking lot was really configured for this facility. This isn't the most current parking lot, primarily because you'll see on 20th Street, which is the block to the east, or the public street to the east, there are not 5 curb cuts onto 20th Street. There are 3 onto 20th Street, but that's pretty representative of what the parking will be comprised of.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question about tax increment financing. I know that the the baseline value is established as the vacant lot. Is that correct?
Downtown Lincoln had a pretty substantial increase for the preliminary values for 2020. And the preliminary increase for this property was substantial. And my client is working through that process, through the tax protest process with the county assessor to try to bring that back into more of a market value. We think it was excessive, but the base value was a bare land value at this point.
And because it was a baseline value, does that allow them, it seems like receiving $2 million in TIF seems a little bit high for a project that's 12 million? Or is that in line?
I think that's, I mean, it's in that under the 20%, and it depends how you measure it. And whether we'll monetize all that, I'm not certain, but at this point, that's what the calculations really project based upon the valuation and the future value and the incremental value that is going to be created. Because that's what we focus on, is the incremental value.
Okay. Are there any other questions of Tom Houston? Okay, thank you, Mr. Oh, wait, Richard has a question for you, Tom. Go ahead, Richard.
Right now, this is just an amendment to the comp plan and an agreement for you to start working on the redevelopment plan with the city. Is that correct?
To the redevelopment plan, and our next step, the final step, is the redevelopment agreement, which is in process, working with the city attorney's office.
Did I see you're going to want to change the zoning on this at all?
No, we were required to get a special permit just for the height issue to increase it. The downtown design standards requires that you screen any mechanical equipment placed on the roof, and we had to get a waiver of that height limitation in order to have 5 stories and to have the density that really was required for this project. But that was approved by the Planning Commission back in mid-April. So there's no change of zone. That the B4 zone is the correct zone, and that will permit this project to occur as a mixed-use project.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
And then,
Tom,
Tom, go ahead, Sandra.
Madam Chair, Tom, you spoke just long enough for me to come up with a question. So, in your request for a height waiver, will that additional height that you've been granted give you what you need to screen the mechanicals on the roof?
I guess a perspective, an examination of the height, really coming from, the concern was coming from the west to the east, because it's higher in the west. And but we did a sightline study to make sure that it was screened from the traffic coming from the west to the east. So the height waiver does allow that screening to occur above the 5th floor.
Okay, and I saw that, I mean, I read the minutes of the Urban Design Committee, and I did not note that anybody had a concern about a negative impact you might have on the Capital Environs. I did not see minutes from the Capital Environs Committee. So have you met with them, and are they cool?
This site is not in the Capital Environs District. It's adjacent to the Capital Environs District, and that's why there's a height limitation otherwise. But this site is not directly in that environs area and is not required to go before the Capital Environs Commission.
All right. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Houston? Thank you very much. I don't see any. Are there any other testifiers, either in the chamber or Luxford studio, that would like to testify on this item? Okay. Is there anyone online that would like to raise their hand to testify? Please do so at this time. Okay, I do not see anyone raising their hand. Sandra?
Madam Chair, there may be somebody. While we were having a conversation, here she is. Ms. Kinsey sent a Zoom webinar chat question about whether or not this item could be testified on. And I see Ms. Kinsey's square is on the screen. She did not, I did respond that all items were available for testimony if they were for public hearing. She may be ready to talk.
Yes, Jane, can you hear me? Okay, Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs of Lincoln Government. Since there's a 52 million debt shortfall of the city debt, we believe that this ought to be tabled at this time. Even though the present property tax is a little bit versus what it would be if there is a development on there. It's better to have that low tax rate than to take it off the rolls for 15 years. We don't know what's going to happen in the future financially for the city, for the individuals, for the developers, or whatever. So we think it's best to not approve any kind of development at this time. The TIF is large. And I guess we question whether the city can afford that. So we would be not in favor of this going forward at this time. In addition, there's just a statement that a TIF is needed for the project to go forward. There isn't an amount. They haven't looked at the financial statement of the developer or how they're going to finance this. So we're not in favor of it at all.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kinsey. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Mr. Houston, did you want to come back up and do a rebuttal? Or Dan, please?
This will be developer purchase TIF, so the loan that will generate the debt obligation will come from a bank. It'll be solely the responsibility of the developer to pay back that TIF. We anticipate that that will be paid back with the increment that is created by the development itself. The development will also create construction jobs during the process, which I'm certain most people in the community could support. The project, as Mr. Houston has outlined, is something that we've identified. Our Affordable Housing Action Plan has come back and supported every diverse type of housing that we would want for the city of Lincoln. Workforce housing certainly qualifies as the kind of housing that we would like to do. And so for those reasons, we would support this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Anyone else in the chamber? I do not see anyone, so we can move on to the next item.
Our next item on the agenda is item 4C, appeal by David Fiala of Planning Commission's denial of administrative amendment 20007 to amend the land use trip table for properties located within the Appian Way Regional Center Phase 2 Commercial Center, generally located at South 87th Street and Highway 2.
Okay, is there anyone in the chamber that would like to testify on this? Is that Mr. Fiala? Yes, okay. The floor is yours once you, or the microphone is yours once you get settled.
I'll even do the diligence with some wipe-offs. How's that?
That's wonderful.
Again,
David Fiala with FAA Properties at 8601 Amber Hill Court. Also, mailing address P.O. Box 83821 Lincoln. Again, with FAA Properties. We are the applicant, which is FAA Properties. I'm the representative. The purpose for this amendment was finally able to happen. This could have happened several years ago in regards to receiving the data as a member in this nonprofit. And when I say the data, specifically access to the use permit tables that were not provided to us, but more importantly, the trip generation publication by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So we are asking for an approval of the amendment that was provided. The amendment was only correcting wrong previous numbers out of the book. There was 15 of them, and that's from the Institute of Transportation Engineers 6th edition trip generation publication. And there was 2 physical lot updates, one on a building square footage wasn't correct, and one was simply on the number of fueling positions at the gas station. So there was no use permit. This was just a corrective item, and I've brought up in the past reasons for that. And our point, or the position, which really isn't my opinion, it is the position of the data from the book that I found, was the city, other than providing clerical assistance to approve this and move forward, should not have denied it. Following our findings, in Exhibit E of the application shows that we did provide notice to the members. The meeting notice was provided to the appeal meetings with the city planning to the members, and no owner came forward at the city planning appeal hearing, nor really could they come forward to contest the facts. It's the pages from the publication that we're talking about. And no one can really disagree with the 2 physical buildings, building and gas station items. The city failed to provide us notice in 2015 when we owned the property that an amendment came through to increase the trips for our property, went from 60 to 97. We weren't provided the application. We weren't provided notice of the change to our property. We weren't provided notice of the approval at all. Exhibit C and D of the application, or of the amendment, which I did email the link to that document to the City Council on Friday. That was one item with the city planning, that they didn't take the time to review the permit and the substance to it before they denied the appeals. I don't really see how that was a due process action when they didn't even review the information. Iger's owner representatives are clearly laid out in written claims with the association documents that the calculations were made by the city. And I also provided a link just to a phone call, because this has been going on for so many years, where Clark Anderson represented that it came from the city, when the city has clearly denied that they came up with the numbers that were incorrect from the book. Excuse me, I'll take a drink of water. And Mr. Corver, Dr. Sutton were part of this nonprofit association with the developer, did form a nonprofit association which took over the rights of the development in 2008, and I have provided that to the city attorney's office, and I provided it in the city council meeting back in February of that document that had that on there. And if we can, as far as on the TV, if we could just focus on the documents on the page, I would appreciate it. I don't like looking at my mug too much. So, but one of the common things I do see and hear when I watch city council meetings or city planning is just the talk about due process. And due process goes to as far as assuring rights are secured for everybody in every facets of city government. And I'm just making that point here, regardless if it's city planning commission, city council, the mayor's office, police department, city attorney's office, county attorney's office, or the sheriff's department, whether someone is a victim of something, whether someone is bringing something forward, their rights should be respected and granted, such as putting an application in as I did with the rights to do it with this application. Number 3, in terms of respecting the applicant's right to due process, this amendment should be approved. We have shown the fraud aspect to where if the numbers provided were higher than they actually were, that would increase dues within this association the way it was ran. City council, or excuse me, not city council, city planning was aware of this at least for multiple years because I brought it to their attention. What this is doing is just correcting 15 numbers out of a book. They weren't the correct numbers. Fraud due to these numbers financially affected. Owners of the development, Iger amendment to delete the table is a reason for the denial of the application. It was brought after the light of day came. Yes.
Mr. Fiala, you have 1 more minute. I'm sorry.
After the information was brought to light of day, and I would like to provide this information. So the amendment, I scratched it out, but I'll go quickly since I'm going to get limited on time, which I wish was part of my due process to explain this to everyone. But we looked at the table, we reviewed it, we reviewed the ITE use, and then verified the number out of the book. And I'll jump forward if you could, would there be a possibility to grant me another 5 to 10 minutes just to go through with a few things I have here?
Mr. Fiala, we can give you a couple more minutes, but I think we have heard your concerns a couple of times as well, so we can give you a couple more minutes.
But here, and again, a point would be hearing the concerns versus looking at the data is not a concern, it's a reality to the facts. So, okay, this is the latest use permit that was approved by the table. It talks about ITE 6th edition, the rate, the PM trip numbers from the book. I'm gonna go down here to our number out of the book. It says it's 3.53. You go to the book, and it's 1.28. This is 15 times. You go through the book, that simple, and I corrected the data from the table. So that's just to explain what the audit was in terms of going through there. On the application, I noted on each line item what was changed. And down here, just showed that there was 4 of them that were correct. 9 of them were higher. 9 of them were changed to higher, and 6 of them were changed to lower. The denial of the amendment, although it was fully supported with all of the documents, pages from the book that I copied that were exhibits, was a reference to typos. Not one reference to one of the changes, the 2 physical changes or the 15 changes from the book, not one mention of them being incorrect. So, there was a reference in the denial that I need letters of objection from other owners that they don't agree with the numbers in the table. And that's not silly, that's not a city policy. That's not a city policy, and the due rights process, the best resolution overall is to correct numbers. Nobody should need to come forward like I have to say, I should know if something goes to the city and the city approves it, they looked in the book and they verified it and it was approved. And that didn't occur. And that's why I'm still here now. I don't think this should happen to me or anyone. So there was no substance in the denial. This is the approval from 2015, not sent to us. We were the owner of the property at the time. No copy to us, nothing was sent to us. And at the time, you may not be able to see this, but it increased the trips to 97 from 60 that were currently there at that time in 2015. And then just to show over 4 years, the numbers in terms of to Iger, that it was a $18,000 gain because of the manipulation of the numbers that were not provided in good faith to the city or to us when they had a duty of good faith as a board on a nonprofit association. And to our entity, we paid over $42,000 And I won't go into where the money went, because that's not the subject here. The subject here is there was no good faith reason to deny the application. And if deleting it is, after 15 years, if deleting it is the solution after that application comes forward, I just fail to understand how my due process can be interrupted when someone wants to go delete something that it doesn't change it. It doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't correct it. So I just think the facts speak for themselves and can answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fiala. Are there any questions for Mr. Fiala? Are there any questions? Yes, Sandra.
Mr. Fiala, so you know that City Council a couple of months ago removed the trip table from the amendment, from the agreement. And so it is not something that the city would rely on as a part of this agreement. Are you asking us to reinstate the trip tables and add them back in? So you'd like us to change our decision twice? You'd like us to not only reinstate, you'd like us to basically overturn our last vote, reinstate the trip tables, and then hold the developer accountable? Is that what you're asking?
And again, if we can zoom in on the projector here, that's a great question, Sandra. And again, I kind of rushed through this, but one of the items that was part of the application that I provided, one of the points was if this has been populated for 15 years, it should be accurate and verified and not deleted. And one of the other parts of my amendment are that the owners are no longer, after this amendment, are no longer allowed to make amendments to the table. And I hope you can understand, just coming at this in a good faith basis from my perspective, that we came with the pages of the book. The pages of the book were wrong. I didn't give an opinion or anything like that. This is just a page from a book that I had to audit, that I couldn't get a book for 3 years upon asking for it, and city planning no longer had the book. So that was part of the process here, is there was no verification by the city, so what was the point of the city approving it? But I think there should be a sound want to make sure it was accurate, and we move forward with an accurate document when we know the city was approving numbers that were wrong. They didn't verify it. They said they didn't verify it. I understand the reason they didn't, because they said it wasn't important, but it was important to us. So I was looking to move forward. And part of the representations I made to the city council was that the right to delete that table was provided to the association in 2008. And it was signed by the developer. So whether or not, I just would say, how is something binding if it was signed by the developer in terms of moving forward? And an additional point that I would make is that in regards to an item that was approved by city council on the 12th, I was out of town and I couldn't come to that meeting, but there was a specialty retail use which has a specific number on it. Just as I described for the book, it's a number that's an average number for everybody else. Instead, we started talking about, and so this was on the application was specialty use, the approval from the city was specialty retail use, but then the city changed their approval to something that had a low number. So instead of having the 4.9 number, there was a number like 0.55. And so there was only 4 trips generated, which then would have affected all the other property owners into paying less in dues. That was the only point to this matter going to city planning or going to city council, is I said, look, I'm not disagreeing with the use. I think it should be allowed. City planning agreed with me that the use should be allowed. And it wasn't just agreed with me when I talked to them. They put it on their approval. So on the December 19th approval, what I appealed was there was a table that had different numbers on it that weren't accurate for the use. So, and this was approved on March 12th of 2020. So we were still making approvals for the trip table even though it was deleted back then. So
So
in
you're
terms
asking
of,
us to reinstate the trip tables so that you may correct them.
yeah, I'm saying, and I brought this to the fact before, that the amendment wasn't properly provided by the right party. The right party is Prairie Lake Plaza South that has the right to delete it. So, I mean, yeah, it should have been done correctly, and it still should be, and my amendment does that. I've communicated with the association. Some people don't like it. Someone's not gonna come forward and say, oh yeah, by the way, we know we had a fraudulent number to defraud everybody. It's a very uncomfortable scenario that this association's in. But everybody knows the boat that they're in, you know, and we just want fairness and due process even within our own association and not bug you guys. You know, I'm asking you guys to do the right thing, and we shouldn't be here bugging you. This shouldn't be in front of the city council. If whether it's an engineer or an attorney that's representing IGRCorp, they have a duty to good faith and they have a duty to not represent fraud. They need to bring that number forward. I mean, that's a violation of the code of conduct of the bar if you're bringing numbers forward that are a wrong number out of a book. You know, this isn't some complicated debate. I just pointed to the number in the book.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fiala. Are there any other questions? I do not see any other questions. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to testify on this item? Is there anyone participating via Zoom that would like to testify on this item? If you would please raise your hand. Okay, I do not see anyone who wishes to participate. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiala. Sonia, we can go on to the next item.
I have item 4D, appeals by Ellie Hardenkoff and Lisa Tomes of the Planning Commission's approval of special permit 20008 to allow for the development of community unit plan with up to 28 dwelling units with requested waivers to lot dimensions, setbacks, and the private roadway design standards on property generally located at Fletcher Avenue and Telluride Drive.
Council members, my name is Mike Eckert, representing Tucker Mountain LLC. This is a project, put up a couple maps here for you, generally located just west of North 27th Street and south of Fletcher, in an area that was preliminary platted a couple decades ago. And the land is currently zoned R4 and was originally planned for a church, which did not materialize. And so our client entered into a purchase agreement on the property, and then we engaged in a series of discussions with the planning department on what would be the best use to fit into this neighborhood, given that it was zoned R4. And over several iterations, we came up with the plan before you in your packet that shows 28 units, a total of 7 fourplexes, and that is only at 60% of the allowed density here in the R4 zoning. And we worked with them extensively on this Kokomo Drive that goes through the project. We had several versions that ended it in a cul-de-sac coming up here, and all of the traffic for the units, the internal units, would have come back to Telluride Circle. And they did want this connection out to Telluride Drive in order to provide better vehicular circulation as well as pedestrian circulation. And so we did that. We worked out some waivers, and as importantly, we also during that time ended up widening the width of Kokomo Drive to be 25-foot wide instead of 21-foot wide, so that it could have parking on one side of the street in the areas where there were no driveways. And then we also are building 13 ancillary parking stalls there. And so the current code requires that for every 2 units, you show that you can do 1 on-street parking stall. which the on-street stalls like this as a parking magazine are allowed on private streets. They're not on public streets. And so I note that mainly because the developer did spend some money to get the extra stalls that were above and beyond what he needed to do by code. And so I think the issue at hand here and the reason for the appeal was the impact that the project would have on the parking for the neighbors to the south. They did benefit from several years of having the freedom to park on the north side of the street because there was no development. And so I put together this exhibit that indicates in pink the number of cars that could still park on Telluride Circle, and then in green the number of stalls that the developer has provided. And so there are 32 existing townhome units here that were originally built, and this demonstrates that even after our project they'll still have approximately 20 on-street parking stalls. And so in this project on the south side, those townhomes were built before there was a standard in place that said that you need to provide one on-street parking stall for every 2 units. And so the 32 units, if they were to be built today, would need to show how they could get 16 on-street parking stalls. And this demonstrates that there's actually 20 that can be achieved. So if we were to permit our project and permit their project is exactly as we've shown it here, there would be enough stalls to meet the code. And so that, I think, has been the crux of the concern with the neighbors. And I understand their concerns. We had some discussions at the Planning Commission about these 3 buildings that face onto Telluride Circle and the ability to spin them and get them to get the driveways to come off of Kokomo Drive internally. We worked through many iterations with planning on that, as we mentioned, and the site was just too tight to do it. And the developer really desired to get these 28 units to make the project work economically. And so, we have done our best to try to turn these inward, but we do have the right to plat them and develop them onto Telluride Circle. And so with that said, I think I just want to reiterate that, we are only at 60% of our density. And I think one part of the Planning Commission, Planning Department, report said very clearly that it would not be appropriate to require this new development to address the parking issues for existing lots outside of the boundary of this special permit. And again, our boundary is again this area here, and we feel like our client has gone to extensive lengths and cost in widening the internal roadway to help out on the parking situation. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Eckert? Yes, James?
I just want to say, I think I might have I think there might be some testifiers in the audience, and I might have some questions after public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this time, we will see if there's anyone else in the chamber that would like to testify on this item. Please come forward and come up to the podium and kindly identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Lori Tomes, and I live on 2427 Telluride Circle. I basically read the Lincoln Plan 2040 and the Community Unit Plan, our CUP, and I agree Lincoln needs to continue to provide low-cost housing as we grow. I also strongly believe respect and protect are key words in both the Lincoln Plan and the CUP, especially for the existing neighborhoods. In the L Plan number 7, neighborhoods and housing, they have infill and redevelopment needs to respect the street pattern, block sizes, and development standards of the area. And diversity of land uses is important provided the use fits within the character of the block and neighborhood. So if you look at I haven't used one of these before, so you just tell me if this is correct or not. Is it coming across? Yeah, okay, cool. So if you look at the color-coded zoning map, you'll see this development is one of 4 R4 sections in this area of Lincoln. There's not one R4 building in any of these zoned areas. All have been built as single-family, 2-family townhomes or apartments. This would be the only actual R4 development. Most are single-family homes, and we are blocks from the Autumnwood retirement community. We have families and seniors who inhabit most of our neighborhood with no yard and a two-story design. Families and the elderly will not choose to live here. The proposed development is not respecting the character of the block or neighborhood and belongs closer to high-density housing. So the next part is the CUP agreement, and it says basically the purpose of this chapter is to permit and to encourage the creative design of new living areas while protecting the health, safety, and general welfare of existing and future residents. So we, the existing neighborhood, are not being protected. The developer is asking for 6 waivers to get this passed. We have raised concerns over most of them. Even during this COVID-19 crisis, 13 different neighbors filed opposition letters and 6 appeals were filed. Many are very concerned with the size of this development going into our neighborhood. Our concerns include various safety issues such as stop sign variants, ability of emergency vehicles entering and exiting, which will be even more important now, and the developer not only taking our on-street parking, but also not providing enough, which evidently they now have come up with more parking inside the development. So if you look at, this was the map that we were left with last time, and it was used very quickly during the rebuttal of the last planning meeting, but there were not at that time, and now they've come up with a solution that appears that there's more. However, they're also saying that they're asking everybody to park down at the end, and the problem with that is going to be emergency vehicles. They cannot turn down there if there's anybody parked in that cul-de-sac. It's impossible, and there's more than one person that can testify to that. So they're still taking away, and I do not know, honestly, I looked at the plans and somebody else looked at the plans who actually works with concrete. They can't find where the fire hydrants are going to be. Right now, they're currently there and right here. And so perhaps they counted that when they were adding up all these numbers of potential parking spaces that will now be available. But it's dangerous, in my opinion. So we'll see where the fire hydrants are, because it's kind of interesting.
1 minute.
Yes?
You have 1 minute more.
Okay. So this is a photo of 17 vehicles using on-street parking on Telluride Circle yesterday. If the developer is a good neighbor, they would work with the existing residents. I haven't heard one thing from them, but evidently they've come up with these answers on their own. So it's all about the parking, and you know that, and that's why they're coming up with this answer. But it's interesting that they're saying that it would not be appropriate to require this new development to address parking issues for existing lots outside of its boundary. However, they're taking most of our spaces. So who's protecting us? If the Planning Commission and City Council are protecting the existing neighborhood, they would require a minimum of 30 on-street total parking spots. That would include Kokomo. So I want this piece of property to be developed, but please protect and respect the existing neighborhood when issuing your vote. We will have little to gain and much to lose. Adding to the tax base is not the solution. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tomes. Is there any questions? Any questions for her? Okay, I think we can go on to the next testifier. Is there someone else in the chamber that would like to testify on this item?
Hello, my name is Chita, and I'm living at 2401 Telluride Circle. As a resident there, I have been there for 4 years, And what Lori just have said, I totally agree with her, and that's very much what I'm concerning. 4 years ago, when I decided to buy the house, and I just love the area with like the space, open space right in front of the houses. And I totally understand. That time I was told that that land was the church land and they will not do anything with that. But I totally understand everything can be changed. And the new buyer, they can do whatever they decide with their land. But just please think for residents who are living in there. They put, like, the buyer, they put out their benefits at the first, at the top choice, and maybe just not concerned about what people living in there. Most of the, I think with the new units building like that, should be like for just the rental property, and would be a lot of people should be moving in out, and like traffic problem, and more people, just more trouble should be caused. And the thing I'm concerned about most, like Lori said, like about if anything for we need for emergency cases, you know. So they may have bill, so, but just to me, I think should reduce the unit instead of 7, instead of 28 units. Should they be concerned about less than that? I understand this. When they decide, it's hard to change their mind, and they should already concerned to what their right to do on their land. But please just concerned about what the residents who live in there worry about. Yeah, please. That's what I have.
Thank you very much for coming down to testify. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Ta? I don't see any questions. Thank you. Thank you very much again for coming down and testifying. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to testify on this item? If you could please come forward.
Hello, my name's Ellie Hardikoff. I live on 2365 Telluride Drive, and I just have a few comments to make. This is our neighborhood, so you can see that the land in the front view here, and this is looking to the east. This is the open area that they want to put 7 fourplexes, 28 units, 2-story high. So I did read the CUP, and I did have a couple comments that I wanted to reiterate, and some of it has already been brought up. But the permit for CUP is to use creative design in buildings, open space, and the interrelationship while protecting the health, safety, and general welfare of existing and future residents of surrounding neighborhoods. And that would be us that live there currently now. And the land surrounding the tracks for the proposed community unit plan will not be adversely affected. And I think we will be adversely affected to some degree. We also received a letter when this was a yellow sign first appeared in the yard, which is kind of baffling to me because by then they've already developed and designed without any consideration of the neighbors. And then we get to go before the Planning Commission for a final review. So again, I feel like we're not being considered in this situation. And also, this has been referenced in an earlier statement that we have basically no rights in when it comes to parking because the developer is only responsible for his property. Well, when he takes away our public parking spaces, where's my right? to have my public parking space in front of my house. So I'm just curious about how that works. And when I first read that letter, I was really kind of angry because as a homeowner, I should be able to have family and friends over and not have them walk 2 or 3 blocks away to get to my property. My concern too is 7 units in such a small place. And we all know what happens when you cram a lot of people into a small place. It can cause traffic issues, it can cause trash issues, and it can cause trouble. And I didn't buy my house 2 years ago to live across the street from many apartments. I bought it to live across the street from townhomes that are similar to what is in our neighborhood, which is either one level or a more modern, or not modern, but a bigger just duplex that's 2 stories. I also have a concern about street lighting and fire hydrants. The only street lighting we have on Telluride Circle is along the vacant lot property that is currently going to be developed. So where will those street lights go? We need street lights in our neighborhood, not just the street lights that are going to be provided on Kokomo Drive. We also need fire hydrant access because our property is just as valuable as the property that is being built under the new CUP arrangement. At work, we always challenge people and we always ask, is it value added and does it feel right? And in this particular situation, I do not feel that it feels right to me. 28 units in a small space, 2 level, no basement. On the current property that is here on Telluride Circle, 12 of them are owned by homeowners. The rest have been bought as rentals, and we can get anywhere from 2 to 4 people, if not more, living in each unit. So we already know what it's like to have renters that come and go every year. The property here with 28 units, 2-story, again, no basement, so that means people are going to use their garage for storage. All right. And then on this property here, when you got property line against property line, what kind of value does that add for families when you have no green space and you have no place to go outside? I mean, the rentals that usually have kids in it are playing beer games outside. Well, there is no space for that. There's also several waivers that are needed. You're taking away existing parking. The intersection of Telluride Drive and Fletcher is very concerning because you have additional cars, anywhere from 50 to 100 cars, depending on how many people are going to live in each unit, now coming out onto Telluride Drive here from Kokomo or up here off of Telluride Circle. I believe this is going to be about 3 car lengths from the stop sign. There is no traffic light there. During rush hour of school time and the end of the business day, this area is clustered. So now you add an additional 50 to 100 cars there. I'm concerned with that. So what I'm really more concerned about is what my rights are as a property owner and how this CUP idea is not suitable for all subdivisions. We're not an urban area in this photo that you can see. The fact that the property value and my quality of living can be diminished by this CUP development is not very satisfying. Again, what are my rights and my choices? It feels like somebody else is telling me how to live in my house, and I pay my taxes, and I am a homeowner, and I don't agree with somebody telling me how to live in my property. So I'm just curious as to what the next step is and what our rights are.
Thank you very much for coming down to testify today. Are there any questions? Any questions? I do believe we have someone waiting to communicate via Zoom and testify on this item. If we could have that individual who would like to testify on this item. Is it Chris? Chris, we will go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
I don't see myself, so I didn't know. Okay.
I don't see
My
you
name's-
either.
Okay, just a minute. Start video. There we go. All right. Hi, my name is Chris Holmes. I live at 2427 Telluride Circle. First of all, I hope you've read all the residents' oppositions previously wrote, submitted, and expressed. There's a wide variety of reasons for opposition. A lot of people can't come down. A lot of people cannot Zoom. As you can see, I'm not real good at Zooming, but it's okay. I am in opposition to SP 2008 plan. I am concerned with the increasing traffic, congestion, safety on a winding, curving, narrow, dead-end Telluride Circle Street. This is an unusually long street for a circle dead end. Therefore, it affects children, adults, drivers, bike riders, garbage and delivery trucks, also importantly, city plows, fire rescue vehicles, and police. I hope some or all of you have driven to this area to look at how it is designed and then envision it with this new development and 12 new proposed units on Telluride Circle alone, which will bring extra traffic, cars, pedestrians, kids, adults, bikes onto a circle dead-end street. Will this really promote public health, safety, and general welfare? That's a question. Now, if you look at your let's see this paper, the civil design group's project drawing. If you turn those units 13 through 24, which are the ones that will sit on Telluride Circle, so that their driveways face inwards towards Kokomo Drive instead of backing out onto Telluride Circle, it will not put extra traffic concerns onto an already busy, congested Telluride Circle. It should also enhance their community plan to look more uniform and community-like if they all face inward toward Kokomo Drive and inward toward each other. I find it odd they face 12 units one way and 16 units a different way. It doesn't seem like a community unit plan, but more so a bunch of fourplexes looking structures in an overcrowded into a small 3.44 acres. I also wonder, what can residents expect from construction as far as Telluride Circle closures? Will they have to put sewers, water mains, etc. in? Will they have to close the street? As the south side of Telluride Circle has one way in and one way out, and no alley accesses, and no parking close by, perhaps 2 blocks away. I realize this is a tough site for infill, but please think of the safety for all residents involved. Let's make this a safe residential area for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Toms, for Zooming in with us. Does anyone have any questions? Ms. Toms? Any questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item in the chamber?
Read that. Is that okay?
Yes, go right ahead.
This is from Jana Lynn and Shiloh Mentor. I am appealing the Planning Commission's decision for the fourplex buildings they are creating across the street from us on Telluride Circle. I'm not able to attend in person today due to various circumstances, including homeschooling my children. Here are my comments along with some pictures from last night where we couldn't even access our street due to emergency vehicles. Our street is small. Adding 28 fourplexes will increase the congestion tremendously and will affect the intersection at Telluride Drive and Fletcher in such a negative way. There are so many cars leaving our neighborhood constantly already due to multiple rental properties with 3 to sometimes 8 people living in those dwellings. I'm not against building on the land across from us, but these dwellings that they want to create are going to be filled with more traffic than this area is capable of. We are also disappointed with how the city of Lincoln seems to have forgotten the north end of the city. There are no parks within walking distance, no trails, and what we have left of a community is trying to be overrun with these fourplex buildings. Lastly, here are the photos taken as we tried to enter our street last night. There is a narrow street that we feel the Planning Commission has not taken into consideration. Anyone else with an emergency would not have been able to get in or out on our street last night. We sat behind these vehicles, unable to gain access on our way home. And that's what she wrote.
Thank you. Thank you. And I believe we have someone else on Zoom that would like to testify at this time. There you go. Yes. I see Isabel.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. This is not the issue that I came here to speak about, but some of the dialogue was a little bit concerning to me, so I just figured since I'm here anyway, I'd like to speak on this issue. I want to kind of respond to some of the villainization of density that has been coming up through this conversation. I know that we all kind of want a really healthy place to live, but the mere fact that this very negative dialogue about rental units and the added like traffic flow and just some of the concerns that are coming up, I think are really an unfair characterization. I haven't looked at the development. I'm assuming that it's going to be market rate. So I'm assuming those people also want a nice, affordable place to live. I also just want to talk a little bit about some of the public access to the driveways. So I think that while I was skimming it, I think that there's ample access to cars on the private properties of the homes. I know that sometimes we have visitors and things like that, but I don't really think that that should be an issue because it is public property. Maybe folks should just be parking their private property on their private property, and that could take care of some of those issues. I do think that they're thinking about our city and the Affordable Housing Coordinated Action Plan that has been presented by the Urban Development Department. We are in need to add density in other parts of the city. So as many of you know, I work in the Everett and Near South neighborhoods, which is already super dense, and there's little to no opportunity to add more density within this area. And so folks are still needing to have a place to live. We're going to have to build within the next 10 years, 17,000 units for our city to keep up with the growth of the folks who are living here and trying to make this place a home. And so adding a little bit of density, not incredibly much, but density that makes sense in other parts of the city is going to be super crucial to that, because we can't keep crowding people in on the core of the city. It's just going to create more stress within our existing infrastructure, and places that are a little bit outside of the core of the city where they have that newer infrastructure are very well equipped and kind of precious land to develop that density a little bit. So those are my comments. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Isabel. Are there any questions for Isabel on this subject? Okay, thank you for testifying on this item. I understand you're going to be testifying on another item a little bit later on. Okay. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to testify? Is there anyone else that would like to testify via Zoom? I don't think we have anyone else waiting. Just wanted to give one more chance. I think at this time there might be questions for staff. Is that how we wanted to go through questions for staff? James, I'm looking at you because I know that you said you might have some questions after you hear all the testifiers.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick questions for Mike if he just has a chance to come up real quick.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if Mike can come back. I
am here if you can see me.
I can't see you, but go right ahead. I can
Okay.
hear you.
All right, very good. Oh, there we go.
I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding some things correctly. So how much density is allowed in this space? Not how much are you guys going with, but how much is allowed?
Property. And so the permitted density is actually 48 units, and we're only choosing to do 28.
What led into the decision to only do 28 instead of going for the 50 units that would be possible?
Well, it was primarily driven by the planning department, and I think, we live in a community where they do a very good job of looking out for the surrounding neighborhoods. And so that's really where we started, by a meeting where we came in and said, hey, what do you think would work here? What do you think would fit the best? And we went through several iterations and came up with the one before you, to get the 28 units and not lose any. And we've discussed the ability whether to flip those driveways or not. And we've tried very hard in AutoCAD, and we just can't get it to work because of the setbacks on Telluride Drive. So that's the primary driver. Councilman Bowers was taking a lead from the planning department and getting a style and a layout that would work, which then included Kokomo Drive and included a lot of the waivers that the planning department and Lincoln Transportation and Utilities agreed to do in order to make another road connection in there to avoid some of the problems that the other people have talked about. So, but yeah, and thus then with a lot of the waivers, the need for the community unit plan. So, but I think it's important to remember that if we were denied this project at this level, we could come in tomorrow and pull building permits for either one 3-story 48-plex or 2 3-story 24-plexes, all 3-bedroom units if we wanted. And we have that right by right today. When we talk about the property owner's rights across the street, there's also certain property owner rights for this parcel and the zoning that's currently on it.
Thank you so much for answering that question. The other question that I have is, one of the concerns that have come up has been lack of green space. And I saw that Schleich Park is about a mile away from the development. I just wanted to know if this development is going to impact that park that's a mile away for those families. And the reason why I asked that question is, if one of the concerns is having access to green space and kind of areas to run around, and with there being a park about a mile away, is this development going to impact that at all?
I don't believe that it will. There was some discussion about this at the Planning Commission, and that, be it a good or bad decision, that right now that we feel like the Parks and Rec Department can handle and maintain about 1 park per square mile. And so that area from Northridge Heights over to about halfway between 27th and 14th Street was the mile, and the park was designated over there. I don't think it'll have an undue impact on that park. It's been there for several years, and there are currently over 1,200 apartments on the other side of Fletcher, a hotel, and a single-family neighborhood. So these 28 units would not impact that.
And I think the last question that I have is just about parking. There's a lot of concerns about vehicles being able to get down the street, and that this is going to increase the amount of traffic going in. Can you speak a little bit to the amount of parking spots that are available? I think, can you just kind of clarify that for me, how many parking spots would be available, and if that's a real concern?
So I'll put that exhibit back up, and I will also address one of the issues or questions about, if streetlights have to get moved, our developer will be responsible for moving streetlights. If hydrants need to get moved, our developer would be responsible for moving the hydrants. So any of those things on his side of the street that have an impact with the infrastructure, you'd have to take care of it. So back to your question, this kind of highlights, though, where we believe that on-street parking stalls, or at least cars could park. I think it's important to understand there are no parking stalls on a street. There are simply the ability to park. And this street is 27 foot wide from back of curb to back of curb, just like every other residential street in the city of Lincoln has been built for about the last 30 years. And so emergency management services have the same challenges that they would have on any single family street, multifamily street, that may have 2 vehicles parked on either side, but they are designed in a way that a fire truck and an ambulance can get through there. And so I would then reiterate that we've provided 13 stalls for our units here, and we show how there can be on-street parking outside of the driveways for about 8 more stalls. So that's 21. We only were required to provide 14. And so we're, you know, from an expense perspective, we've done a couple of things, as I mentioned. We widened the street to get those extra on-street stalls. And then we've also added this segment of roadway to the planning department's desires to have some connectivity and not have all the traffic coming down on this one street. So again, I think if this entire project was to be brought in as it's shown today, it would meet the parking requirements.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the ability to, or the opportunity to ask questions.
Are there any other questions, Sandra?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, would you describe a little bit about the fourplexes? How many bedrooms do you expect to put into each of those? You don't have to give me, you know, numbers for every building, but on average, how many are 2 bedrooms? How many are 3?
I don't know for sure. I know that there will be all 2s and 3s in a mix. Probably predominantly 3s is my understanding. No 1 bedrooms. But I think an important part of that question is that every unit will have a 2-stall parking garage. And we have made sure that every unit also has the new standard for a parking stall in the driveway, which is to maintain 22 foot from the front of the garage face to the back of the sidewalk so the vehicle's not overhanging it. And so every unit will effectively have 2 parking stalls in the garage, 2 parking stalls in the driveway, which is 4, which is twice as much as required by code, even for a 3-bedroom. A 3-bedroom only requires 2 parking stalls. And I think something I failed to mention earlier is all the existing townhomes on Telluride Circle are under the same situation. They have 2 garage stalls. They have 2 parking stalls that meet that same requirement, 22 foot from the face of the garage to the back of the sidewalk. So each one of these units actually has twice as many parking stalls as required, and each one of our units has twice as many parking stalls as required, plus the additional 21 on-street stalls we provided.
Thank you for that clarification. So each unit in a fourplex, in your fourplexes, will have 2 garage and 2 parking spots on the driveway. Addressing the open space issue, I'm going to ask it a question similar to Councilman Bowers, but slightly different. I see in your layout that you have some outlots identified as open space, and is this primarily for drainage, or is this actual open space that you think your residents would be able to use?
Yeah, we believe that it is space that can be used. You know, and despite some of the angles here, we do have some larger green space areas along the street here, as well as back in here. That became just too tight in the ability to get the driveways in. And then this is a storm sewer easement right here that takes the storm sewer into Fletcher Avenue. And so, yeah, there will be a recreational opportunity for them there. And even though these areas are smaller, it is some green space that I think when you compare it to the adjacent neighborhood, I would believe that we probably have more green space. We haven't done a Florida area coverage ratio. That's not required. But, yeah, everything where the buildings aren't shown and or the setbacks. And I don't believe that the owner is going to allow any fencing, so there's probably more space than you realize here. These lines are all setbacks, which kind of are invisible once it's all grass.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Eckert? I have a question. Mike, if you could go over again, several of the folks testified about streetlights, fire hydrants, stop signs, and I wasn't sure, like, for example, are there going to be interior stop signs on Kokomo Drive?
LTU has not requested that, Councilwoman Raybould. We could certainly do that if desired. I think perhaps here, obviously on the Telluride Drive entrance, which is probably where the propensity of the trips for the internal units will go out, as we all take the shortest route possible. And so we're happy to do that. And that's, I think, really a LTU decision. And then, again, if there are hydrants that either need to get relocated or lighting. Now, the lighting, it's just going to be a matter of moving the poles. This street, when it was built, LES did their study and determined how many poles would be done. And then we will have, LES will tell us how many lights that they desire on the interior road as well as then LTU will review our executive order design plans for our water mains, and then they'll tell us what hydrants we need and what locations to meet the coverage codes by the state.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Did anyone have additional questions of staff? I don't see any. All right. Well, thank you. Did you hear me? No, I said thank you very much. If there's no one else wanting to testify, I don't see if we have any other hands up in Zoom, but I think we can go on to the next item. So thank you all very much.
That concludes our public hearing resolutions portion. We can vote on the resolutions.
Okay.
Item 4A is accepting and approving the report of new and pending claims against the city for April 1st through April 30th, 2020, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Bowers, seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Rabel,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Item 4B is the Comprehensive Plan Conformance 2003, application of Urban Development Director for proposed amendment to the Antelope Valley Redevelopment Plan to add the Antelope Tower Redevelopment Project, generally located between L Street on the north, K Street on the south, Antelope Valley Parkway on the west, and 20th Street on the east, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Bowers, seconded by McGinnis. Any discussion?
I think this is a wonderful project. I'm looking forward to having that block filled in.
Terrific. And Tammy, did you have a comment?
Sorry. Nope.
Nope. Okay. Since no further discussion, let's please call a roll.
Okay, McGinnis,
Yes.
Rabel,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Item 4C is the appeal by David Fiala of Planning Commission's denial of Administrative Amendment 20007 to amend the land use trip table for properties located within the Appian Way Regional Center, Phase 2 Commercial Center, generally located at South 87th Street and Highway 2, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Bowers, seconded by Washington. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, Richard.
Just like a clarification on the vote on this. Yes means we are in favor of his appeal, or is it in favor of the project moving forward?
David?
Yeah, so good question. So this is before you on appeal, which means it's basically been written up by the law department in the affirmative. If you were going to take the consistent action with what the Planning Commission acted, which would be they voted to deny, the motion would need to be a motion to deny. But I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm trying to explain that if you wanted to do something consistent with the Planning Commission, which was denial, you would move to deny because it's written in the affirmative, which is just the normal course of how they handle this.
And so, David, we would need to make a different motion at this time if that is someone's intent, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Sandra, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think I was I didn't think to ask the question that my wise colleague, Mr. McGinnis, asked, because I flipped it in my mind. So this is an affirmative motion to approve the appeal. And if we felt that the appeal should not be approved, we need to create a new motion. Okay.
Correct. Yes, Richard.
Or could we say no to this appeal?
Yes.
And then that would be the same as not approving his appeal.
That sounds right.
David, did you want to make, David, did you want to make a clarification?
I guess, so what's on the table right now is there was a motion to approve in a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what you could do if you wanted to maintain that motion, what you would do is you would vote no against it.
And we would not need another motion necessarily.
Correct. As long as you ended up with 5 or 4 votes one way or the other.
Right.
Okay, are there any other questions for David? Any other discussion?
I think I'd like to make a comment here. I know that Mr. Fiala has come before us on a number of occasions to clarify this issue. And I read through all of the material more than once and made highlights so that I would not confuse myself once we got into the meeting. And, you know, I find it troubling, actually, that we're being asked to undo a decision that we recently made and reinstate something which we said no longer should be of consideration. And though he is passionate and eloquent, I am going to vote to deny his appeal because we specifically said that the trip tables were outdated and no longer of use. And I do not want to step in to what I think is a private contractual matter between the developer and Mr. Fiala. So I will be voting denial.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? I do want to say that I will be voting no on this because it has been the consistent opinion of the planning department and of our law department that that to deny this application makes the most sense because we have removed the trip table already from discussion. And I think, again, we have heard Mr. Fiala and his concerns. And as a person who deals with property management, maintenance, and landlord lease relations, I would encourage him to continue to work with his fellow tenants to work with their current landlord to come up with a more equitable solution of determining some of their pro rata shares or common area maintenance, because that's what other tenants have done in a number of other shopping centers. They've worked together to come up with solutions and resolutions to these issues, rather than looking to the city to come up with an alternative form. And because we have already removed the proposed trip table, I think that this whole discussion is a little bit moot, but I am going to continue to propose that we deny and vote no. Please call the roll, Sony.
McGinnis,
No.
Rabel,
No.
Ward,
No.
Washington,
No.
Bowers.
No.
Motion carried 5-0.
Motion failed.
Motion failed, excuse me. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, no problem.
Moving on to item 4D. Appeals by Elliot Hardenkopf and Lisa Tones of the Planning Commission's approval of special permit 20008 to allow for the development of a community unit plan with up to 28 dwelling units with requested waivers to lot dimensions, setbacks, and the private roadway design standards on property generally located at Fletcher Avenue and Telluride Drive, introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Bowers, seconded by McGinnis. Any discussion? Any discussion on this item? Yes, Richard.
Yeah, this is kind of a hard one because I've seen some of these roadways up there in that area. There's one particular, and my son and a few others were all members or all college students, and it will get crowded. And enforcing the 4 unrelated entities living in these units may be something that we may want to look into as we move forward. But on the other hand, this is zoned R4. It's zoned for 48 or more units, and that's kind of the right of the property owner. And the property owner seems to be working in interest of what the rest of the area looks like. So I'll probably be voting against the appeal at this point.
Any other discussion? David, did you want to clarify this one again for us? This is an appeal.
Correct.
We
So
always have
again,
trouble with these, getting it like, which is the right direction to go? So if we vote for the appeal, that means what?
so this is on appeal, but keep in mind that this is before you as if it's being presented to you as the actual proposal. So you're actually acting on the project. So it has been appealed to you. That process has been given its due process. The hearing has been had, and now you can act for or against the project, the special permit. So the motion to approve and second is on the table, and therefore you are to vote up or down the project.
So a vote yes is in favor of the project, and a vote no is against the project.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Is everybody clear? Okay, please call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Rabel,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Okay. On to more items.
Our next item on the agenda is our public hearing ordinances, second reading and related resolutions. I'll be calling items 5A and 5B together since they are related. Item 5A is Comprehensive Plan Conformance 20004, application Urban Development Director to review as to conformance with the 2040 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Antelope Valley redevelopment plan that adds the Hepburn Square redevelopment project on property generally located at 2400 Q Street, and the related item of change of zone 08066A, application of Hepburn Properties LLC for a change from B3 commercial plan unit development and from R6 residential to R6 planned unit development to add additional residential area with waivers for the expansion of the Antelope Valley planned unit development approximately located on North 24th and Q Streets.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to testify on it? I see Dan Marvin, Urban Director.
Thank you again. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Marvin. I'm Director of Urban Development. And what we have before you are two items. One's an amendment to the PUD, and then the other is a plan amendment that moves this project forward so that we can do a redevelopment agreement with them. Again, this project has gone to Planning Commission. It's gone to Urban Design. Went to Urban Design again as the last project. It's gone there 2 times. They've come forward with this rendering. Urban Design has approved this as a project that they think meets the standards. So this is a south elevation, and here's the west elevation. It's on the corner of 24th and Q. So one is a look at from Q Street, and then this would be a look from 24th Street. We think this is a wonderful infill project. It's a 12-plex that's going in there. One of the issues that came up early on, and I know we've had conversations with council about this, but one of the issues that came up early on with this was the requirement of 1 3/4 parking stalls per unit, that made this project difficult to complete. Planning worked with this development and supported a 1-to-1, so there are going to be 12 parking stalls as part of this project instead of 20. This will be a small TIF project. What we anticipate when we bring forward the redevelopment agreement is a project that will create 2 apartments out of the 12. 2 of the 12 will be available to people with incomes of 60% area median income or below, and another 4 of the units will be available to people who have housing vouchers from the Lincoln Housing Authority. So a total of 6 of the 12 units will be available as what we would consider to be affordable. The reason the developer can do this is they also own a 12-plex next door to this, so that they can spread that. Those numbers can be spread over 2 12-plexes, and that they can make the financials work on that. We would expect this will be brought forward as a small TIF project, which would mean that the city of Lincoln would use our program of small TIF to help promote this project, which we, again, are supporting. Meets many of the goals of our Affordable Housing Action Plan. And to date, I'm only aware of one individual who sent in a letter. I wouldn't call it a letter of opposition. I would say it was a letter of concern. We worked with that individual and discussed the affordability component, which spread over 24. I think they originally thought that the affordability was spread over just 12 units, but since it was spread over 24 units, I believe that they felt that this was more an appropriate mixed-use development, and they could support it as well. And with that, I'll yield back my time and answer any questions you might have on this.
Are there any questions for Dan? Oh, yes, Tammy.
Oh, not a question, because Director Marvin and I have had a lot of discussions about this project, but I just want to comment how happy I am that 6 of these 12 units are for affordable housing. And I want to thank Urban Development and everyone that's worked on this project and the neighbors. It's what we need to be doing, I think, in response, and it does fit into, I think Dan mentioned, Director Marvin, the action plan component of that housing plan that's been recently announced. So I'm just say kudos to those involved. I think it will go a long way as a start as other projects in helping our affordability for housing in Lincoln. So thank you, Director Marvin.
Dan, I have a question for you. You know, we were talking about parking earlier. Where does the overflow parking for this apartment complex go, as well as the adjacent one?
Well, the adjacent one is, I think, covered. So this one would provide on-site, would cover 12 parking stalls. And what I think we have to start challenging or thinking about is a 1 3/4 parking requirement as maybe something that we don't need to encourage in every location in the community. Some places have no parking requirements, and some are providing greater. But I think that in general, if you are near public transportation, a bus route, other sorts of transportation, you're near bicycle trails, maybe the 1 3/4 requirement of parking stalls is excessive, and in this particular case, it's more appropriate for it to be a 1-to-1 parking requirement. I saw Councilman McGinnis had his hand up too, so I didn't.
Okay, Richard, did you have a question?
Are we changing any zoning on this, or does it stay in R6?
I think, well, that might be a question for David, but I believe what the zoning is staying the same, but it's under a PUD, which would allow it to make some adjustments. Is that an accurate answer, David?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, are there any other questions for Dan? Oh, Sandra.
Dan, what are the size of the apartment units? I mean, I have some concerns about parking. I understand public transit. And maybe this doesn't need to be the 1 3/4, but I'd like to get a further idea of, yeah.
We will be back to council with the redevelopment agreement, and we'll probably have the interior finished. But I think in general, what the expectation is, we'll be looking at 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr. Marvin? I don't see any hands, but I do know we have someone waiting to testify in Zoom. So is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? All right, Ms. Kinsey, I think you're up.
Okay, thank you. We are not happy with this project showing no proof of finances. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, it said you're muted by the host.
Ooh, okay.
So the Hepburn family has been around for a long time. We're not sure, without some kind of financial statement, whether they need a TIF at all in order to do this project. They have other properties in this area. So I know that the intent of the legislation by the state was to have some kind of financial proof rather than just a statement that this project couldn't go forth without that. I'm thinking that there isn't going to be any retail here, so otherwise we could make a comment about that. Because there is no, retail is not doing well at this time, and we don't know whether it's going to be or not. But I think that was settled in the other, or was an issue in the other project.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Kinsey, for coming, participating via Zoom to testify. I understand that there's someone else that would like to testify on this item via Zoom. Hi, Isabel, I see you're there.
Hi, everyone. This is still not the item that I came to speak on, but I would really like to, I was a little bit surprised to hear that this project is being developed with the intent to accept housing choice vouchers. So I'd just like to be on the record to say that this is a really great idea, especially because, as Dan mentioned, the coordinated action plan mentioned that we need housing the most for households that are making less than $25,000 a year. And those are definitely the housing voucher recipients. And as we know, there's a really long wait list for those housing vouchers and very limited properties for them to, for families to be accepted into.
Terrific. Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate them. Is there anyone else in the chamber, or is there anyone else that would like to make a comment via Zoom? Okay, I think we can go on to the next item. Oh, Sony, can you hear? We'd like to go on to the next item. Okay.
Item 5C is an ordinance to temporarily extend the terms of certain city of Lincoln permits and licenses due to the COVID-19 pandemic by delaying certain permit and license expiration dates.
Okay, is there anyone that is planning to testify on this item?
I am.
Okay, yes.
Justin with the Health Department. Hi.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem. So good afternoon, council members. My name is Justin Daniel. I supervise the disease prevention section at the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. The Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department recognizes the tremendous impact the directed health measures have had on both food and body art establishments. Food establishment permits normally expire May 31st, and body art permits normally expire on June 30th of each year. So the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department is proposing for this year only that both food and body art establishment permits be extended past their normal expiration date until July 31st of 2020. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Daniel? I don't see any, and I think people probably think that's a very good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking to us today. Is there anyone else in the chamber? Is there anyone else online via Zoom that would like to testify on this item? I don't see anybody's hands up, so thank you very much. I think we can go on to the next item.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to item 5D is amending Title 9, Public Peace and Welfare of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to prohibiting excessive prices by creating a new chapter numbered 9.50 entitled Offenses Against Excessive Retail Prices to prohibit excessive profiteering during times of emergency.
Is there anyone that would like to testify on this item? And I'm looking at James Michael.
Yes, can I say a few? I would love to say a few words first. Thank you, Chair Raybould, and thank you other council members for your attention to this matter. This proposal reflects the time and energy that each of you have shared to craft an ordinance that fits a need and a standard that our neighbors in Lincoln deserve. This outlaw's the practice of individuals reselling supplies at an excessive price during an emergency declaration. During this pandemic, many of us have experienced worry and fear. We began to run low on personal hygiene supplies. And then oftentimes we would go to a store and see empty shelves where hand sanitizer,
I'm going to be home in about an hour.
gloves, and face masks once were. Each of us has received contact from constituents who are concerned about limited access to hygiene supplies and asking us to do something. As supply runs out in stores, the only access that some people had to these products were from others reselling from their own stock, unfortunately at an excessive price. Reselling of these supplies at a higher amount was so common that our Attorney General joined others and other Attorney Generals in the nation and signed a letter to Amazon asking for stronger controls on third-party sellers. In this letter, the Attorney Generals state that it had been well documented from independent third-party organizations that there have been excessive pricing from these third-party sellers. And some of the examples listed were on Craigslist, a 2-liter bottle of Purell being sold for $250. On Facebook, an 8-ounce bottle being sold for $40. And on eBay, face masks being sold for $40. In addition, I also had a report from constituents that people were selling supplies like hand sanitizer in parking lots. It led me to research how other communities were handling reselling of products at excessive price, also known sometimes as scalping. I found that our neighbor city, Omaha, specifically has their municipal code ticket scalping prohibited, making it unlawful for people to resell a ticket to an event being held at a sport or concert venues at a greater price. If other communities and some states have outlawed the reselling of concert and sport tickets, then our citizens deserve the same protection with hygiene supplies from individuals who seek to scam Lincolnites during a pandemic. As I've spoken with community members and colleagues about this proposal, I would like to address two concerns. The first concern is that no one is forcing individuals to buy these items at a higher price. While we can debate the definition of coercion, I think we can agree that a person is being exploited when they are forced to buy toilet paper when they run out at an excessive price not determined by market forces. The second concern is, how do you define excessive price? Well, as I did research in crafting this proposal, I read an article from the University of Miami Law School. What they stated was that this type of language is a strength and not a weakness. It bypasses the pitfalls of excessive price reselling statutes that arbitrarily impose a limit on service fees, and in addition provides individuals who are reselling items at a higher cost an opportunity to justify their practices and prices. This is not the first emergency declaration our city has experienced, and it will not be the last. But we must take the lessons that we learned from each disaster to better prepare, better protect, and better serve our communities. Our families deserve protection from financially being scammed during a disaster, and this is one step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for James Michael? And I believe we have a couple of people that would like to testify on this item via Zoom. So I think we have Isabel. This is your item that you wanted to testify on. Thank you again. Hi.
Hi, thanks for hearing from me again. I feel really strongly about this issue that James brings up because I do work as a community organizer for the South of Downtown Community Development Organization, and I feel like it addresses some of the issues that we've seen come up in the past couple of months. So as you may know, the median income for both of the census tracts that we focus on is $24,000 per year, which makes it really hard for folks to even access basic needs. And then especially during a time of a pandemic and an emergency, there were a lot of instances where people weren't getting the supplies and medical needs that they were trying to keep themselves safe with. So I personally went to Russ's Market on 17th and Washington on March 13th to stock up on stuff. I've spent a lot of money, but as I got there, and this was March 13th, so way before like everything blew up in Nebraska, there were only a few rolls of toilet paper left, and people were just grabbing as many as they could. I think I saw one family that had a bunch of toilet paper in their cart, probably 6 packets or so. And this is concerning because of the lack of availability may drive people, as James Michael kind of points out, may drive people to seek these in other places. Because Russ's Market is in the neighborhood and it is the most accessible store for a lot of folks who rely on public transportation, rely on foot or bicycles, the fact that this is just being cleaned out and then people are exploiting people on top of that is a little bit gross in my view. Another thing that I would like to bring up is that folks are still having to go to work. Folks who live in the neighborhoods are still having to go to work in spite of all this. So I've been at home for the past couple of months. I'm sure you all are distancing and trying to keep safe. Lots of folks are still having to go to work because they have weird hours. They work as servers. They've lost their jobs entirely. And then there's also folks who are traveling to the packing plants, like the one in Crete in Smithfield plant, where we have seen a really big outbreak of COVID cases. So on top of like all of the stress of having to put themselves at risk, put their family's health at risk, reaching out to being out in public and being in contact with so many people, it really is alarming to see other folks who are taking advantage of this and advantage of the fear and pressure that people are feeling and exploiting people to just for their own financial gain. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is that buying in bulk is not possible for a lot of families. So while we could have told people to prepare beforehand or told people that they should have taken precautions earlier or been a little bit more proactive in searching for supplies, it's just not possible for a lot of families who are living paycheck to paycheck. So while some of us can afford to buy 10 packages of toilet paper, not a lot of families do that, and a lot of families are living on very limited means, which kind of restricts, is even more restricted when you're getting folks to buy things at an excessive price. With that, thank you for your time. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Isabel, very much. Are there any questions for Isabel? Okay, seeing none, thank you for coming to participate with us. And I believe we have Shauna Kister is up next. Shauna, I can see you're there. Can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My internet connection's a little funny right now. Okay. My name is Shauna Kister, and I'm just coming in as a
Shauna, your mic got, there you go. Do you want to start
there.
over?
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Shauna Kister. I'm coming in as a private citizen, but I also work in mental health. So I work with a lot of the homeless population and lower income people in Lincoln. And a lot of the same points as Isabel mentioned. People just don't have the means in the first place to buy extra items in advance, but also at this time, of course, a lot of people have lost their jobs. I work with a lot of people on fixed incomes, so they don't have the means to stock up more items, especially at the time of the pandemic. So I'm very much for prohibiting people selling these items that are needed at an increased cost, because people don't generally have the means in the first place, let alone during a pandemic time.
Thank you, Shauna, very much.
That's all I had to say.
Oh, that's all you had to say. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure you had a chance to complete your thought. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Kister? Okay, thank you very much for participating. And is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? I do not see any, so please let's go on to the next item.
Okay, I will be calling items 5E and 5F together. 5E is authorizing the issuance of general obligation refunding bond series 2020 in a principal amount not to exceed $7,500,000. And also item 5F is authorizing the issuance of limited general obligation arena refunding bond series 2020 in a principal amount not to exceed $25,500,000.
Welcome, Brandon Kaufman, our Finance Director.
Hi, I'm Brandon Kaufman, Finance Director with the city. So these two ordinances are primarily for refundings where we're asking for approval for savings. However, at this time, I'm asking for a delay in the public hearing until we can come back when the meetings are held in the council and not through a Zoom session. And that's primarily just because we're trying to mitigate any type of legal risk that could possibly occur because of opinions. And by delaying it, it would mitigate that completely.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Kaufman? Has bond counsel weighed in on this one as well?
Yes, bond counsel has weighed in and does agree with delaying until we're back in the chambers.
All right, thank you. Tammy.
Just a question of clarification, maybe for Mr. Kaufman or council, but so we fully intend to be back in the chambers by June 1. Is that date certain for you, or is it just when we are back in chambers, or do we need to be concerned about what specific date, Brandon?
Oh, I mean, if you're planning to be in chambers on June 1, if we could hold the public hearing at that time, more than anything, we're looking for the approval so that we can get out to market to save the city money moving forward with these bond refundings. So if you all are back in chambers June 1, I'd like to keep it at that date so we can move forward as soon as possible.
Understood. I'm just, hopefully we will be, but if for some reason we were not, I'm just wondering how that works legislatively for us as a body if we lock into that. So we can just see how it goes, if you're comfortable with that.
Yes, I would probably say, and we would just request that this be put on pending until you're in session. And then if you come back June 1 and you vote again to do more Zoom meetings, then at that point, we probably ask for a delay until you're coming back into the council chambers again for the vote.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions for Brandon? Seeing none, I think we do need Sonny to make a motion to delay and put this on pending with public hearing, a continuation of public hearing until June 1. And then on June 1, if we need to request another delay, then we can do so at that time.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. A motion to delay or
Motion to delay until we're back in chambers on June 1 for the public hearing.
Okay, with public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
It was introduced by Washington, seconded by Ward. Any discussion? Brandon, did we get it right? Is that what you, is that in compliance with your request?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
wonderful. Thank you.
All right, good. Any further discussion? Okay, Sonny, let's call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Okay.
On to the ordinances. We're almost there.
Yes. Okay, next item is ordinances third reading and related resolutions. Item 6A is text amendment 20003, application of Reed Burdine to amend section 27.72 of the Lincoln Municipal Code, chapter 27.72.060, by allowing vehicle stacking in a drive-through lane and front yard setback for the B1, B3, H1, H2, and H3 zoning districts, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Washington and seconded by McGinnis. Any discussion? None? Okay, please call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Item 6B is the change of zone 20010 application of Barry and Kelly Fowler for a change from AG Agriculture to AGR Agriculture Residential on property generally located at South 46th Street and Bennett Road, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second. Jane, you're
Can't hear you,
muted.
Jane.
The question was, is there any discussion? If not, please call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0. Okay, that concludes our ordinance's third reading. Next is our resolution first readings, item 7A. Ordinance's first reading is item 8A. Our pending list are items 9A through 9E. That
Good job,
concludes-
everybody. I'd like to move for adjournment.
A second.
I have to say, we have to hold our horses a bit because it isn't
Oh, right.
public comment tonight.
Oh, thank you.
We have public comment tonight and then also on May 18th. And so I'm reaching out to see if there's anyone in the chamber that has stuck around. Looks like the chamber is empty. And then I'm reaching out to anyone who wanted to testify during public comment period via Zoom. Jane Kinsey, I see you popped up. Jane. Go right ahead. Welcome back.
I don't know if I'm there or not.
You are. I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. I guess I have concern about the shortfall, and I'll probably have a chance to make a statement about that later on. I'm not sure where it stands at this point. So onward and upward for managing it, and good luck.
Well, thank you, Jane, very much. You will have another opportunity to provide comments once the administration presents its budget and compiles a lot of other numbers and figures and projections in June. So we will have you back at that time to provide additional public comments.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you again for your participation via Zoom. Is there anyone else in Zoom waiting to provide public comments? Okay, seeing none. Richard.
Move adjournment.
I'll second that again.
McGinnis moved to adjourn and seconded by Washington. Okay, Sonny, please call the roll.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you all, everyone, for your patience and participation via Zoom. Stay well, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.